All right, let's move on to the SEC championship between Georgia and Alabama. High stakes here. Georgia wins. They're in, they lose, could be out. Alabama wins.
They're in. Say it. They're in. Come
on. They're in. They are.
Don't know how, but they're in.
5.5-point underdogs. Total sitting around 55. There's some injuries. McClellan, the running back for Alabama, probably will miss. He was seen on crutches. Georgia, Bowers banged up. McConkey banged up with ankles. And then 2 key injuries on the defensive end for Georgia, Humphrey at corner and Dumas Johnson at inside linebacker. I think this line's about right. So I made it like Georgia -5. So I have nothing from a side perspective. I could see a case for both. I'll make a quick case. I'm on an island here on the under. Try to get 55 or better. But here's how I see it playing out. Now, the scary thing is it's a fast track, and you get all these SEC. We talk about this every year. All these SEC athletes over. You go back and look at the scores. The over's gone 13-4-1 since 2005, the best over at any conference by far. But I have adjusted it up for the fast track, but I still like the under. Here's why. First off, the Alabama offense is so predicated on getting explosive plays with Milroe. They're not going to have a ton of success throwing the intermediate range, which is where you need to attack the quarters coverage of Georgia. Milroe's an insane deep ball thrower. Guess what? Georgia's pass defense doesn't give up any explosives. To put numbers behind it, Alabama's 7th best offense in passing down explosiveness. Georgia's defense is number 9. So how I think Georgia can be run on a little bit, and the key to this game is Milroe's legs. By the way, I think they got to unleash him. Rushing props on Milroe, I think, are in play here because the problem there, the sacks count against it, but Georgia doesn't get a ton of sacks. So and Milroe and the offensive line have been better of late. So I think there's going to be some value on Milroe rushing. You got to unleash him here. And that's the path to success. And mobile quarterbacks have had some success against Georgia. But I think Alabama's going to come out and they're going to try to run the ball every which way, whether it's Williams, because I don't think McClellan's going to play, a lot of Milroe. And I don't think they're going to have much success throwing the ball because they don't really throw it in intermediate, and Georgia doesn't give up any explosives. And Alabama, by the way, plays slow. And when the stakes have been higher, they've played even slower. Even last week, they were trailing and playing slow. So I think it's going to be a super slow-paced game. Both teams feeling each other out early. And then the other side, Georgia's a snail. And I know the Georgia offense has been rolling. But, some injuries. But most importantly, this is by far the best defense they will face all year. Can we talk about the Georgia schedule of opposing defenses that they played? Let's go through it. Ball State, when they sucked. South Carolina, and it's still Ball State. South Carolina, awful. UAB, worst in the country. Auburn, awful. Kentucky, awful. Vandy, awful. Florida, awful. Missouri, there's a good defense that they faced. And, they got the 30 points at home. And it was a close game throughout. Ole Miss, bad. Tennessee, not great. Georgia Tech, horrendous. This is a huge step up in class. So, and the same thing can be said for Alabama, by the way. If you look at their schedule, what defense is that? I mean, the last 5, everyone's like, oh, the Milroe's back. The last 5, the last 3 weeks when they've averaged like 50 points, the last 4 weeks they played LSU, arguably the worst defense in the country, Kentucky, horrendous pass D, Chattanooga, and Auburn. And they barely got the 26. So, they just haven't played many great defenses. I mean, yeah, I think Texas is a great defense. And Alabama only put up 24 and lost by double digits at home. So I think the defenses are, in a slow-paced game, are going to rule things in this game. I think that both offenses are going to play slower, rely more on the run game. It's going to be a slow start, slow pace. And I think this will end like 27-23, 27-24, somewhere in that neighborhood. So I like the under. We'll look at some Milrow over rushing props. I just think it's a good matchup for both defenses, and it's a big step up in class for each. A lot of familiarity here, a lot on the line. So I think you get a slow start too. What do you see here?
I can completely understand why you think the under is the player, because I must have researched this thing for hours. I could not find an offensive advantage for either, right? Georgia is the leader in offensive momentum killer. I'm sorry, they're third in offensive momentum killer in the nation, just ahead of Michigan and Oregon. You know, it looks at interception, fumbles, missed field goals, sacks, fourth downs. What does your offense do to make mistakes and stop themselves? Georgia doesn't do much of that. That also kind of coincides with Carson Beck, you know, really kind of growing into the role, getting Lad McConkey healthy, getting Brock Bowers back in the offense. They became unstoppable. If those two aren't playing, then you're losing two of the biggest pieces that he's had to use to get Georgia up to this point against a strength of schedule that is 59th. Georgia dominates rushing attempts with inside and outside zone, but Alabama dominates those on defense. Like there's no run concept. I'm not going to go like side to side here. There's no run concept that either of these teams run that the other defense cannot stop. I mean, they are elite in stopping everything. The only concept that's given the Crimson Tide trouble is power. Georgia's only ran power 30 times this year. So I just do not see an advantage on the ground whatsoever. Carson Beck is seventh in catchable throw rate. That's, you know, do you hit your target in stride? But Bama's secondary is second in coverage per PFF. And Beck has been pretty fantastic against cover three. But I mean, you're going up against one of the most dominant secondaries in all of Alabama. And that is one of their most dominant coverage packages is cover three, which is drop my corners and my safeties and make sure no explosives get behind me. So, you know, you go to the other side of the ball. Is the Georgia defense going to be able to stop a mobile quarterback like Jalen Milrow? Because they've had problems with quarterbacks that we didn't consider to be dual threat. You know, beautiful deep ball by Milrow. We've talked about it a million times. 23 big time throws, 0 turnover worthy plays on throws that go over 20 yards, a 15-1 TD to INT ratio. It's beautiful. The problem is Georgia's only allowed 3 passes over 40 yards this entire season.
Yeah, you can't get any explosives on them.
No one's getting there. So
a lot of quarters, not bringing a lot of guys, won't give up big plays.
And like I said, Jalen Milrow runs everything out of inside zone. That's what sets up. And if it's not there, he goes for a slant. And if that's not there, he goes deep. Georgia's got an answer for all of that. So I think if you go back and look historically at this game, 4 previous times Kirby and Nick Saban have met in either the SEC title game or the national title game. In the first quarter of all 4 of those games, there's been a combined 13 points. Wow. Like when Stuckey and I sit there and say, like, we think they're going to fill each other out. We think there's a script. It's not that we think, we know. And this is a perfect example of it. 13 points in 4 first quarters of SEC title and national title. I bet first quarter under 10.5. I did take a full game over because I didn't know Lad McConkey and Brock Bowers were questionable. I absolutely believe this is going to be a dry SEC championship for the first quarter. And then somewhere in the second quarter, the adjustments are going to come because these are the 2 best coaching staffs in the nation at making adjustments on the fly. And once they do, the points will come. So whether you want to go first quarter under, full game over, or first quarter under and play a live over, you can do that too. But I definitely think this is going to be just scrappy and ugly for the first period.
Also, something else to keep in mind, 2 really good punting teams for field position, which would, if the defenses are having success, would also help the under. Pace should be slow too, which helps.
Do you have anything on the side? I have a Georgia future to win the SEC, and I took Alabama +5. Did you have anything on the side for this?
I got nothing on the side. I make it 5. So I'll look live to see if I see anything. I might play some Milrow over rushing props. I think that they just unleash him there, especially without McClellan. You don't have as much depth at running back.
And we know how much Milrow likes to run past the line of scrimmage and then throw a pass.
Yeah, and yeah, true. and Georgia doesn't get a ton of sacks, so they don't send a lot of pressure. So that helps with the rushing yard props. So because that's the fear with Milrow, is you take like 4 sacks for negative 38 yards, and then your rushing prop is killed.
Yeah,
but don't think that's the case here, and they've been better in that department. Who do you think wins?
I think it depends on Lad McConkey and Brock Bowers.
Who do you think wins? No, depends.
Alabama.
Wow. I'll say Georgia wins by a field goal.